states decide.
Listen closely.
America right now comes to
what this
Tanzania,
man is saying.
comes to Ghana, comes to Zambia with 16 million. And guess what? 16 million only for Zambia. The 16 million, ask me, what is it for?
What is it for?
For human rights. Across the river, China and Russia coming to South Africa. Ask me for what?
For what?
For a military training and skills sharing of security. So the Americans are more interested in a transgender, homosexual agenda around the world. They will invest their money and give you money to protect human rights. Russia and China are coming with weapons and militarization strategies so that we can protect ourselves. So I want to say this very loud and clear to the Americans. Continue on your transgender agenda. Stay there. Leave us to do politics on the other side. Because what we need right now is not a minority human rights activation. What we need is a societal transformation. And for you as Americans to think that we really envy that when you have an anti-lesbian, anti-gay, LGBT principle, then tourists would drop. Let me correct that once and for all, Sbu. And cut and clip this, and it must be loud and clear. Are you saying to me that all the tourists are gay? And when you hear that this is a non-gay zone, tourism will suffer? Question number one. Question number two. Are you saying that we don't have the right to expressing ourselves as Africans? Question number three. If democracy means majority rules and majority votes against a principle, then why won't you allow that to become law? Are you saying the minority must manage the majority, or the majority must manage the minority? Then if that whole ideology is wrong, then take democracy in a nice black dustbin bag and throw it outside. Because what you are telling us is by the people, for the people, with the people, and all those slogans you hear, what democracy represents. If we are 10 in the room and 9 people say no, and one person says yes, democracy says you go with the majority. So if we say we want to make Africa democratic, and the demographics of our democracy says no, then why do you philosophically want to manipulate the will of the majority to favor the will of the minority? Then this is where it really gets confusing to me. Because you're selling me one thing, I understand this democracy, because it is based on the principle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When it comes to practice, no, you can't practice it like that. Then what do you want? Do you want democracy? You want anarchy? You want indigenous governance systems? You want meritocracy? Maybe let's find another way of governing ourselves. But the ideology of democracy being founded on majority rule does not count. Because the rule that runs the South African constitution right now is not majority count. I will go on record for being on your show and saying it loud and clear without mixing words. Put 100 people on an island and lock them away from everybody. Put 100 people on an island who are heterosexual. Those are homosexual. Come back after 50 or 20 or 30 years. On that island, you'll find graves with no living being there. On this island, you'll find 10,000 people growing and exploring and moving. So having said that, we as a society, particularly as African society, we also as traditional people have a right to our self-preservation and continuity as a people. Alternative lifestyles must be practiced where they must be practiced, but the main agenda of societal drive must be left to the right, because even those that are on the left come from the right. I don't know if that makes sense to you. The conversation that we had for the same-sex marriages was very tricky for me, because it did not seek to address the core issue. Are we saying this is what the people want? Or are we saying this is what the international community wants? Point number one. Point number two, in the event that I decide as a heterosexual that I want to bring up my children in a heterosexual way, why does the homosexual want to stand on the path of my own children and how I want to institutionalize them, and then pollute them with what they want? If you want to pollute these children, make your own. Why come to the heterosexual and then dictate the ways of the homosexual? So who has got the right this time? Are you saying the rights rely with the homosexual, or the rights rely with the heterosexual? The balance needs to be found right there. That every citizen has got the right to life and decide how they want to run their lives and how they want to bring up their children, etc. And so ultimately we might end up with an Urania. Let's create a state where this can happen there. And those who want to live in this other space, they can move into that space. And we are free to choose to change.
It's a very deeper conversation.
But
and also, especially
and we're giving it the time it demands. We're giving it the depth of thought that it demands. So that in the midst of just saying human rights, we don't become emotional over protect gay rights, protect heterosexual rights. Because when you protect homosexual rights, you also need to become respectful of the heterosexual. And when you're promoting heterosexual, you also need to protect the homosexual.
Listen closely.
America right now,
If you want to be transgender, I don't even fucking have a problem with that, and nobody else does. Nobody cares. Here's what they care about. You shoving it in everybody's fucking face everywhere they fucking look, saying that you're the most protected class of society, and you're saying you're the most villainized. Well, the reason you're getting heat now is because now motherfuckers are getting to the point where they're running into schools and killing people because of the perceived hate that they're getting, when in reality you wouldn't even get the hate if you just leave the kids alone. This isn't hard to understand, but the reason they won't leave the kids, why won't they leave the kids alone? Or why would a grown man dress like a woman? And because you don't ever see it the other way around. You don't ever see women dressed as men doing the fucking dances and shit. It's always fucking men dressed as women doing the fucking dances in front of kids. And the real shit is we have a whole infiltration of pedophiles doing this shit, and y'all motherfuckers are celebrating and enabling it, and it's bad. And people hate it. And guess what? They're not gonna fucking take it forever. If you want
Part 1. The most dangerous superstition, starting with the punchline. How many millions have gazed upon the brutal horrors of history with its countless examples of man's inhumanity to man and wondered aloud how such things could happen? The truth is, most people wouldn't want to know how it happens because they themselves are religiously attached to the very belief that makes it possible. The vast majority of suffering and injustice in the world today and spanning back thousands of years can be directly attributed to a single idea. It is not greed or hatred or any of the other emotions or ideas that are usually blamed for the evils of society. Instead, most of the violence, theft, assault, and murder in the world is the result of a mere superstition, a belief which, though almost universally held, runs contrary to all evidence and reason. Though, of course, those who hold the belief do not see it that way. The punchline of this book is easy to express, albeit difficult for most people to accept, or even to calmly and rationally contemplate. The belief in authority, which includes all belief in government, is irrational and self-contradictory. It is contrary to civilization and morality, and constitutes the most dangerous, destructive superstition that has ever existed.
And I will prove that. In the United States of America, you have something called Independence Day. That is derived from the word independent, an adjective, not governed by a foreign power, self-governing, free from the influence, guidance, or control of another or others, self-reliant, not determined or influenced by someone or something else, not contingent, not governed, period. Dependent. What is dependent? Determined, influenced, or controlled by something else, subordinate to another clause, phrase, or word, relying on or requiring the aid or support of another. Zombie. In voodoo belief in popular folklore, a corpse that has been reanimated, especially by means of supernatural power or spell. One who looks or behaves like automaton. A computer connected to the internet and controlled by a remote, unauthorized user to perform malicious tasks without the owner being aware. Captured, domesticated, hackable humans.
Being a force for order and justice, the belief in authority is the arch enemy of humanity. Of course, nearly everyone is raised to believe the exact opposite, that obedience to authority is a virtue, at least in most cases, that respecting and complying with the laws of government is what makes us civilized, and that disrespect for authority leads only to chaos and violence. In fact, people have been so thoroughly trained to associate obedience with being good, that attacking the concept of authority will sound, to most people, like suggesting that there is no such thing as right and wrong. No need to abide by any standards of behavior, no need to have any morals at all. That is not what is being advocated here, quite the opposite. Indeed, the reason the myth of authority needs to be demolished is precisely because there is such a thing as right and wrong. It does matter how people treat each other, and people should always strive to live moral lives. Despite the constant authoritarian propaganda claiming otherwise, having respect for authority and having respect for humanity are mutually exclusive and diametrically opposed. The reason to have no respect for the myth of authority is so that we can have respect for humanity and justice. There is a harsh contrast between what we are taught is the purpose of authority, to create a peaceful, civilized society, and the real-world results of authority in action. Flip through any history book, and you will see that most of the injustice and destruction that has occurred throughout the world was not the result of people breaking the law, but rather the result of people obeying and enforcing the laws of various governments. The evils that have been committed in spite of authority are trivial compared to the evils that have been committed in the name of authority. Nevertheless, children are still taught that peace and justice come from authoritarian control, and that despite the flagrant evils committed by authoritarian regimes around the world throughout history, they are still morally obligated to respect and obey the current government of their own country. They are taught that doing as you're told is synonymous with being a good person, and that playing by the rules is synonymous with doing the right thing. On the contrary, being a moral person requires taking on the personal responsibility of judging right from wrong and following one's own conscience, the opposite of respecting and obeying authority. The reason it is so important that people understand this fact is that the primary danger posed by the myth of authority is to be found not in the minds of the controllers in government, but in the minds of those being controlled. One nasty individual who loves to dominate others is a trivial threat to humanity unless a lot of other people view such domination as legitimate because it is achieved via the laws of government. The twisted mind of Adolf Hitler by itself posed little or no threat to humanity. It was the millions of people who viewed Hitler as authority and thus felt obligated to obey his commands and carry out his orders who actually caused the damage done by the Third Reich. In other
Like I said, millions of...
Probably run the other way, person. Well, maybe it's because people are stupid and reactionary.
Yeah, that could be it too.
Let's just be honest. That's what it is. They're uneducated. They don't know what they're talking about, so they're going at it. People are very angry, and that's what they do. They want to direct their anger at somebody, and this is the result of it. When you don't actually research something, you're supporting somebody who wanted you dead. Look it up and stop being stupid.
Which is funny because it's so crazy what the CIA was doing. They taught him how to be a cult leader. They gave him acid. They taught him how to take it. They taught him how to give it to people and not take it and pretend you're taking it and then manipulate them. Whew, that guy didn't just learn on his
I
own.
also don't understand how it makes sense. Like, he wasn't oppressing my people. Well, you mean black people? But I'm the real Jew. Well, then we're right back to this. Wait, hold on a second. You mean to say that he wasn't oppressing black people, which he was, or he wasn't oppressing the true Jews, which you claim to be, that you are, but you... What are you saying? I'm saying Jesus was a Jew. Well, that we can agree on. So you're saying genuine Jews he hated? Yes. And you're genuinely Jew? Yes. I see.
Oh, okay.
So do you get it?
Site is still up, and they say, the coronavirus pandemic is inevitable, and then boom, it happened the very next year. So people say it's a conspiracy theory to believe that they knew that the coronavirus pandemic was going to happen. You don't have to believe it was a conspiracy theory, or you can believe it wasn't a conspiracy theory. It's up to you. I don't really care. The point is that they made the prediction, they called it inevitable, and then it happened.
And what do we practice in all of the governments all over the world? So, including your so-called enemies, right? What do you hear in the news? China's our enemy, Russia's our enemy. But yet, what do we practice? Something called war games? Name one enemy that practices war games. Name one gang. Do the Bloods and Crips practice war games, prepare how they're gonna kill each other? Like, it's that simple, folks.
Immediately. So for me personally, that signals to me that I should probably pay attention the next time the World Economic Forum makes a prediction and calls it inevitable. And lo and behold, they are predicting that a coronavirus pandemic, a cyber pandemic, is going to happen, and that it is once again inevitable. So if you look into the exercise that they have run this year, I believe they run it in July. They've been meeting and talking about the cyber pandemic, what it will look like. Essentially, their idea is that they're going to have to sanitize the internet because a bug, think of this as like a coronavirus for your computer, is going to sweep globally, and the only way they're going to be able to stop this bug from infecting everything is to effectively shut down the internet, right? And they were talking about bringing down the power grid in an effort to do this. So imagine the government bringing down the power grid, and you would not have access to anything that required an electrical charge. If this sounds crazy, dystopian, and like a nightmare to you, first and foremost, this happens in other countries, right? Obviously in Cuba, when the government needs to stop people from communicating, they just bring down the power grid, right? When the uprisings were happening in Cuba, I believe that was earlier this year, coronavirus time feels like, I don't know if it was the end of last year or early this year, they just brought down the entire electrical grid.
And they do it all over the world. Because, see, I'm on Telegram, and I actually have conversations, where people think and they communicate with each other without arguments and all this distraction. They actually make plans, they actually prepare, they actually teach each other. You actually get to learn something. You actually get to think critically. And some of the people I communicate with live in Lebanon and other places, and sometimes they won't be able to be in our chat groups because the power will be shut off, or the internet goes out. And these are things that Americans, domesticated and captured, have no idea of. They're not being informed of. They're not being educated on. they're not being alerted to. So they become complacent.
But of course, Western nations would never do something like that. If they do it, it's because they need to do it, not because they're becoming evil communist dictators, but because they would need to do it for our benefit. So they were talking about the government bringing down the power grid, and until they come up with a vaccine, I'm not kidding, this is their words, not mine, a vaccine of sorts for the internet, where they would be able to cleanse it and purge it of all of these things that are making it vulnerable. Among those things, they brought up Bitcoin, which is so funny. That one thing that the government can't get a handle on, that is representing a threat to them and the financial markets, the control of the financial markets would be Bitcoin. And suddenly, in running the simulation, they realized that Bitcoin, could potentially be a problem. If you think I'm kidding, you can look this up. It is called a cyber pandemic. And it's something that every single person should be paying attention to. Just in case they magically get it right again, like they did about the coronavirus pandemic, it's good for us as citizens to pay attention to that and to do what we can to prepare. And so I've been having all these discussions with...
Because even though you got everybody already in the PSYOP and fooled inside of 3 years to take the once free flowing information across the interwebs that you didn't have to pay for, to now charging subscriptions and paying big tech, the very ones the Patriots were complaining about being censored by, that they didn't have to pay for before, now they're paying big tech to have a subscription and self-censor them. So now you're paying Instagram, now you're paying Twitter, now you're paying Facebook, and you're making them money, and you're gaining more power for them. But put a transgender on Bud Light, and you'll boycott them. You'll boycott them for a week, till it's time to drink again, and you don't have enough money, so Bud Light is your beer. It's truly amazing. Let me point out something else that was said in the latter of 2020 and the very beginning of 2021 on Telegram. Just imagine that this was being said, but censored from the rest of the world, from being heard or talked about by the same platforms you are now paying money to.
Hey, what would you say to them?
Freedom.
People that I know who say, I'm the...
I don't know how to explain it otherwise. I couldn't remember stuff.
If you've been around people that have had the jab approval.
Yes.
A lot. I mean, I'm digging deeply. Have you been around them like? Sorry to digress. Do you remember that film in 1982, The Thing? Does anyone remember The Thing, the horror film by John Carpenter? And the scientists are saying, have you been around the infected person? How long have you been around them for? This is like that. This is so much like that. When they talk about Hollywood, this is so much like that. So I said to you, have you been around infected people for a long time? Because I haven't.
No, man. I wouldn't say for a long time, but I know for sure. I know even right now. I know it's weird. The last couple of days when I get close to like some people, I get like weird. I know I'm gonna get sick. So I have to get away. And yeah.
And you said you're in Florida?
Half an hour later.
You said you're in Florida?
Yes, I'm Florida.
Interesting.
Have you changed?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I'm late.
What do you make of it, White Wolf? White Wolf, what do you make? You've heard Free Wolf out there. What do you think about that shedding and being in close proximity to people?
No, I wanted to know if there is anything else that changed. Example, when he said he felt on the floor and then, he had blurred vision and he doesn't remember certain things. What did he do to feel better? So did you leave? Did you change place? Did you travel again? What did you do? Did you drink? What happened? What did you take, if you took something?
We started camping like ourselves. We tent up. We stay put for a couple of days in the middle of nowhere. We took some vitamins. We took some vitamins. I drink water. I try to relax. All that stuff. Even I start taking all my phones and electronics to the side, trying to. I don't know. I try everything, and I felt better. I start to feel better after that. But that was the first episode, and after that, it happened.
Free will, when you fell, did you hit your head? Free will, did you hit your head when you fell?
No, I didn't hit my head. Just dropped to the floor, basically. That was it.
So how many days did it take for you to feel better?
I was like 2 or 3 days until I started to feel like myself again.
Okay, so it's like you were
I would like to
intoxicated.
interrupt for another thing. There is this beep going off the whole time, like. Can that person please quit that or their microphone, because it's very annoying. It's super annoying. I'm sorry, but I get really irritated.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was copying something. I'll stop. Sorry.
No, just mute your microphone. That's all. That would be amazing. Thank you much, dear.
Okay, so basically you had a detox. So for 2 days you detoxified your body. So this means that these people that you were close to, they were actually toxic for you. So you were absorbing this protein, this spike protein from the body or from the air or from being close to them, and you were intoxicated. And because this has been, basically the spike protein has been found that attack also the brain cells and can pass the blood-brain barrier. It's possible that few molecules, I don't think very much, because it's impossible, just by being close to somebody that you were affected so much. But some proteins, some molecules managed to cross the brain barrier, and so you were confused and you lost consciousness, which is actually a very good news, because it means that we are affected just by being close to people who produce this protein. And we don't know when we walk or when we take a bus or whatever, we don't know if people have been vaccinated and how their body reacts. Because you have to think, not everybody produces this spike protein in the same way. This is all under study. So it's possible that a small percentage of the population actually start to produce a lot of it. And if you're close to these people, you may be affected.
So is it possible that these people could become is it possible for the vaccinate, the people at the injection, could be the ones that are spreading to the unvaccinated, to us, and we are the ones that are influenced to be...
No, you have
to be cold.
Okay. No, I understand the question. No, it's not possible that they are the spreader. They are the spreader only of the spike protein. But the problem is the spike protein can allow the mutation of the real virus in ways that can be more worse than before. Okay,
inside
so inside of them, yes, no,
right.
Inside of them.
So it can't get to us.
They become producer of variants. What you've heard, that there are many variants that get spread in different regions and by different people. So it's like people can become a machine producing different variants of the virus.
Can I give you guys my theory about what took place here? Can I just give?
So, listen to this part specifically. The beginning of 2021. Listen to what I say.
You a rundown of what I think took place. Seeing I've been really paying attention. Hear me out, if you don't mind. I believe, for myself, this is my theory. All right. They used fear. They used fear in many different ways to enact a plan. Right. They enact this plan, and they pass laws. They get Trump out. They did multiple things with this fear, right? And then the human reacts. Everybody reacts. Do all these different ways. They use the media. They're still using the media. They're using social media. All these things. And it's not just one action happening. It's not just the vaccine. It's voting. It's all kinds of shit, right? So now that that's all activated, they had these vaccines with this new technology. Now there could be some of those other vaccine manufacturers are real, really trying to do something under the same fear that everybody else was having, right? But there is this one manufacturer, or however many, with the mRNA. Now, the mRNA technology is the new thing, okay? So if everybody's in fear, and now everybody's closed down, everybody's going to want to open up. So now you drop this mRNA new technology that has the spike protein. You get everybody to open up, and you got the spike protein going mad. I'm not saying it's planned. It could have been an accident. But I just know that technology is new, and I just know that they used the same type of biology technology in CRISPRs and in breeding dogs and mosquitoes, trying to kill a whole mosquito or a whole mouse field off, like all kinds of things. So my personal belief is they used fear to get the human to do what they wanted to do. They dropped this freaking bomb, which is the biological weapon, and now everybody's going to be also getting that, but also being in fear.
so they could pass something else further. What's that? Well, now you pass your border stuff, your vaccine card, which then snowballs into the social credit system through this new get away from the banking system with the crypto. That's just my theory. In 2021 of January, that's what I said. It's all a big giant mess, but that's just what I see.
You're not very far from the truth.
Yeah.
You're not very far from the truth. The thing is, if I can speak, the truth is somewhere in the middle. I can tell you guys, I'm working in Spain, and I can tell you how the people how the virus pandemic start here, how they tied up to the beds, all the people, and all started with the vaccines of the flu A vaccines, because the flu A vaccines, not everybody knows that contain aluminium, mercury, and some substance that I don't remember what exactly right now, but produces blood problems. I mean, coagulation problems that can produce strokes. And people don't know, and they gonna blame in this summer when they gonna take off the mask. We're gonna blame the rest of us who don't accept the vaccine, who don't accept the shots, and they will try to make this conspiracy in the heads of the COVIDians that the one who don't take the shot are the guilty for all the bad that it's happening.
Yeah, of course it's gonna happen. Yeah.
It's already happening, guys. Like, look at the newspaper. It's already happening here, for sure.
Of course.
I've lost friends because I'm not vaccinated. And I've got a very good reason for not being vaccinated. I believe in the antibody thing. So natural antibodies are way better than any synthetic antibodies. So, but I still have people like, oh, I can't meet with you until I'm vaccinated. Or I don't want to meet with you or talk to you about it anymore. I've lost friends over this. I can't even approach the subject with my family. My sister's had the vaccine. She's had both. She works for the government, so she's totally conditioned and institutionalized. So anyone that works for a hospital, works for a bank, works for the government.
Well, that's a part of the plan, man. That's still a part of the plan. It's still a part of the plan for your mind. It's still messing with
the ones who serve the system, who works in the system, they have to get the shot, otherwise we're gonna get fired.
Well, here I have something to say.
Now listen to this part. This is a nurse. Listen very carefully to what she says.
I'm a nurse from Canada, and I'd like to bring some good news is that I am unvaxxed. I haven't been asked. Well, that's not true. They've pressured us, but I haven't succumbed. And my dad is in long-term care, and I've been advocating for him. So amongst all of this doom and gloom, I do want to say that there are people who are fighting the good fight, and I think it's important for all of us in each country to know our rights. So if you all could reach out and link up with any kind of lawyers who are well aware of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms or whatever it is in your country, I think that what would be helpful is having conversations that are constructive and but also, highlighting all the atrocities. So I just wanted to say that I work for a government organization, I'm not going to say what, but I am unvaxxed and trying to...
Are you probably speaking ill?
Well, we don't have those conversations.
You don't?
No.
Is there a reason, we were talking about this earlier, what is the reason why, from someone who's not obviously in the medical profession, it seems like, if you work in the commercial industry, a commercial organization, if something's not right, people start talking, they start gossiping or whatever. So what happens there when people, when other nurses or people in the medical profession say...
They've been fired. They've been fired and let go because our college does not protect us. We have a gag order.
Yeah.
And this is part of the problem. And I'm really happy to be part of this conversation because this is my way of speaking out.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a gag order.
To the point where it's just people, just even amongst friends, they just don't discuss it, or.
Amongst our colleagues, is the fear of being of a reprisal. So if you are too outspoken, your manager may have a word and you might have to be ousted forcefully. So
So you could clearly see by all the voices that this conversation was with people from all over the planet in 2021 in January. And I was not allowed to share it. And everybody in the conversation was not allowed to share it. Hence why we were all in Telegram and found each other miraculously. Now just think, all the platforms that to this day still do not allow you to share it. Even though I'm sharing it now, it still shows my page is restricted. It's still pushing it to the bottom. And everybody else seems to continue to want to pay the very people behind all of this and act like they don't know. All the politicians, all the Senate, all the Congress, everyone who's come from a investigative background, police, AGs, judges, lawyers, their very tool for their job, their very craft is investigation. And you want to believe that they have no fucking clue? You would have to be a zombie and brain dead. It's literally that simple, folks. You might not like my delivery, but guess what? It doesn't change the facts. And people need to start waking the fuck up and realizing the trajectory that you're allowing pure evil to happen in your environment. And you're completely okay with it. And you're completely okay with being distracted. And completely okay with letting everything keep on going until it gets to a point where you're going to have no choice. But what you're not thinking about is what happens at that point. What you're not doing is researching what happens at those points, because they're documented all over the world. What happens when tyranny happens? Censor themselves and allow their own people that are already in an economic downfall, who already don't have any information being received, to now have to pay big tech to receive information by their own people. That's how easy it is when you are captured and domesticated. You do it to yourselves. So now, everybody that's on the Bitcoin and the crypto, they don't even look at the definition of the words that they're using. That every single word that describes a television, like a vision, or a program, or a channel, or a script, like scripture, when they write a play, because they're playing, or high definition television, because it's higher clarity, it shows a clearer picture. Everything in your world has a definition and a description of exactly what it is. So what is a crypt? And what is crypto? What is a morgue? And what is mortgage? A death grip. All of these things, once the power goes out, it doesn't matter how much crypto you have. Because in the real world, outside of the sanctuary, you need knowledge.
In the real world, real preparation, you need abilities. And if you look at every situation that was apocalyptic, if you look at every country and do the research of what happens when these power outages happen and people are captured and domesticated, Walking Dead episode, do you see them transferring funds of any kind of digital or fake paper fiat currencies? Or do you see them trading abilities and knowledge and skills? But you wouldn't know that because you were disconnected from the natural world where you evolved all those skills before. It's kind of like something as simple as this. Who teaches you how to feel when somebody's staring at you? No words teach you that. No languages teach you that. No school teaches you that. And no parents teach you that. Your natural body teaches you that. But because you have been removed from the natural world, you have no natural instincts of that. And where it comes from, you're not taught it. You're dumbed down. So just like the gazelle doesn't need to talk to the lion to know he's the enemy, he naturally feels it. So for humans, when you feel something staring at you, which could be a lion or a polar bear or whatever in your natural real world environment, you developed that skill. And now today you're not educated on how you developed it. So what happens next?
Husband, seriously, like, what if they actually did this? Like, what would we do? And it's made me realize that we're a very weak generation of people. I'm talking about millennials, talking about, perhaps even baby boomers, of how little we actually learned about survival. And we so often talk about how the governments are right now teaching kids nothing, right? These kids are learning about race, and they're learning about, pornographic material in school as we're discovering day by day. They're learning about how to be woke, and we're like, these kids are so dumb because they're not learning math, they're not learning engineering, and they're not going to be able to do anything in life because they're not learning any hard academics, any hard skills. And I talk about that so much until I started talking about the potential cyber pandemic, and I realized actually my generation was also dumbed down because you can read all the books in the world, every book in the entire universe, right? But if you don't actually know how to grow your own food, if you don't actually know how to survive off of your own land, how smart are you? We have convinced ourselves, especially me, I grew up in Connecticut, like coastal elites very close to New York City, like we have convinced ourselves, and the people that live in these cities, Los Angeles, people that live in New York, as they're saying, we need the Green New Deal, get rid of this, so we don't want to be dependent on our own energy, like we'll send it overseas, but we have convinced ourselves that we're so forward and we're so progressive that we're actually regressive. We don't know anything. We don't know how to grow our own food. The majority of us know how to grow our food. I have made it my entire initiative since moving to Tennessee is for my husband and I to be able to do everything by ourselves. Fortunately for me, my husband is a hunter, so you can take your picket signs and take them somewhere else because I don't care, my husband hunts. Good. That means that we know how to survive a little bit if we're in the wild, right? He's hunted his entire life. I said to my husband, I need to learn how to grow vegetables. Like, this is the most important thing. I need to be able to learn how to grow vegetables. We're going to get some chickens. I never thought I would say this. Like, we're going to be getting chickens next year because I want to be able to know that we have food on our own property. I do not want to be dependent. So for so long, I had in my head that if you're not on welfare, right, then you're not government dependent. But that is so wrong, right? If you don't know how to survive, if you do not know how to grow your own food, if you don't know how to make a fire, I mean, think about everything you would have to know if the power grid went down, right? If you don't have a generator, if you don't have solar panels. I mean, I'm just spitting here, but like, think about all of the things. Actually, imagine your life if the power grid was taken down.
And just think, all those people that seek power, that you give your power to, they don't have that ability. And they know it. And they also know that they need the poor to do it for them. They don't want to give that up. That's why they'll keep you doing what you're doing.
Imagine how many things you'd have to know, right? And I was saying to my cousin earlier, I was saying how weird it is. Every time, if I have a question about something, even if I'm working on a recipe, I'm like, oh, God, what is the ingredient for this again? And I Google it. Everything you have to Google, you don't actually know. You're relying on the internet to tell you something that you don't actually have stored in your own brain, right? So we're so convinced that we're so forward and we're so progressive because we can get answers fired back at us in a couple of seconds. But in reality, we don't know anything. If you have to ask Google, you don't possess the information within your own mind.
So that is what domesticated and captured and dumbed down means when I say it. And I've been saying this for years. If everybody would just take a moment and look back at it, they should actually be thankful. Because me being around, that influence, that idea, is what enabled them to have the same ideas. Because I already knew these things. I already knew what was taking place in so many different areas, in so many different ways in my own life. I've been collecting policies where I was working because I was reading and watching changes happen. And nobody wanted to listen. And everybody thinks that I'm crazy. But yet everything that I have said has been the truth. You've never had to pay me a red cent. I never asked you for anything in return. All I was doing was preparing or trying to help. And what I got in return was clear. Truly clear. It separated the children from the men. It showed me what really matters to certain individuals. And I think that happened for a lot of people across the world. Now, we could take that and hold it as a grudge, or we could learn from it and grow and unite and become stronger and actually learn something, gain and gather intelligence. How many times have I said to people, you remember when you were a kid? Do you remember your home phone number with the rotary dial phone? Well, why do you remember that? Well, because you had to press it every single time. Now today, you store that number in your phone once, and you put a name in place of it. So when you have to call them, you just look for the name and you press the button. That's the dumbing down of society. Jesse Ventura speaks at Google, has a New York Times bestseller. It's on the New York Times list. Yet the New York Times themselves don't say a word about it. Not one media company over a decade ago said a single word about your government's declassified documents. And a best-selling book, a very popular book with factual information. And he's at Google discussing this with Google. And he goes on to say, over a decade ago, the dumbing down of society is our media. Because of us. Because we allow it. Because we're so addicted to the 3-minute segments of what the Kardashians are doing. He used Charlie Sheen and Anna Nicole Smith. He also said, he lives in Arizona. Why do I need to know what murders are going on in California? I'm here in Arizona. We have our own murders. That's the dumbing down of society. That is not news. That is not newsworthy. What's newsworthy is problems and solutions, not arguments, not attention seeking. But if you really were paying attention, he said 60 minutes. That's where it changed. The bean counters upstairs realized, we could sell the news. So because they were losing profits in the regular news, they made it up in the entertainment. Entertainment. Yes, more dumbing down. It's the Roman circus. You see, because the people that go to war and risk their lives and sometimes die, come home, and what's left? What do they get as a reward for serving their country? What do they get? A couple of dollars. And then what? They have to live out the rest of their lives with the atrocities that they witnessed. And they have to go to work for 3/4 of their life away from their family. Meanwhile, people that dodge balls and run with balls on a court get millions of dollars. And everybody wants to wear their name. They idolize them. Meanwhile, if you're a reality TV show host or have a You're Fired show, everybody wants to wear your name. But nobody wants to wear their own. And nobody wants to celebrate the true honorable, the true heroes. And they still believe that they're free. And they still believe that politicians work for them. On top of that, not a single job have they ever worked in their entire lives where the boss makes the rules. Do they pay the boss? If you have a job, you work for them, and they pay you. But a politician gets a job, he makes your rules, and you pay him. Isn't that interesting? All the weapons of war, since the beginning, came from the people. But right now, today, people think the government creates those weapons. No, you just give those companies that are in bed with the government the money to create them because you no longer know how to. It's the Roman circus. It's literally that simple. You have the post office, where you pay the government for a service. But now when you go work for the post office, and you already pay the government for that service, that means you're paying yourself. So where are you winning? Where are you gaining? Because on top of you paying yourself through that postal service that you work for, you have to pay taxes again. Isn't it interesting? Railroads. Government railroads, the same thing. That is socialism. And yet people don't want to recognize it because they want to live in denial. They have the little rope tied around their ankle. They keep on repeating the same cycles. Why were you taught the telephone game in kindergarten? You know, where one person stands behind another and the teacher tells the first person, and then that person tells the next one in line. And by the time it gets to the second person, it's already lost in translation, right? That's what everybody thinks they learned. What about the other half of that? It was supposed to teach you to go to the source for yourself in the first person and not receiving the information through a second hand or third hand or fourth hand. So when somebody like myself is gathering information for themselves to collect intelligence, to gather intelligence, to become wise, to have wisdom, to know, to prepare, to be aware, and I give it to you for free, and I don't ask you for anything, I'm handing it to you. Instead of getting defensive, maybe you should do the same thing. Maybe you should look at what I'm saying and counter it with something logical, with something that you could show that counters it, with actual data, documents, knowledge, proof, evidence. But instead, you'll stay in this perpetual system of good cop, bad cop, solipsistic behavior, egotistical bullshit, divide and conquer. It's truly disturbing because it's so simple. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, hardworking, blue collar, white collar. It doesn't matter what collar you remember that, George Carlin?
Left. The only true lasting American value that's left, buying things. Buying things. People spending money they don't have on things they don't need. Money they don't have on things they don't need. So they can max out their credit cards and spend the rest of their lives paying 18% interest on something that costs $12.50. And they didn't like it when they got it home anyway. Not too bright, folks. Not too fucking bright. But if you talk to one about this, guys, one of you sit them down rationally, you talk to them about the low IQs and the dumb behavior and the bad decisions, right away they start talking about education. That's the big answer to everything. Education. It's, we need more money for education. We need more books, more teachers, more classrooms, more schools. We need more testing for the kids. You say to them, well, you know, we've tried all of that and the kids still can't pass the test. He says, oh, don't you worry about that. We're going to lower the passing grades. And that's what they do in a lot of these schools now. They lower the passing grades so more kids can pass. More kids pass, the school looks good, everybody's happy, the IQ of the country slips another 2 or 3 points, and pretty soon all you'll need to get into college is a fucking pencil. Got a pencil? Get the fuck in there, it's physics. And everyone wonders why 17 other countries graduate more scientists than we do. Education. Politicians know that word, they use it on you. Politicians have traditionally hidden behind 3 things: the flag, the Bible, and children. No child left behind. No child left behind. Oh, really? Well, it wasn't long ago you were talking about giving kids a head start. Head start, left behind? Someone's losing fucking ground here. But there's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks. And it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The big, the wealthy,
The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. They're irrelevant. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media news, all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. You know something? They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later because they own this fucking place. It's a big club. And you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hardworking people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hardworking people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all. At all. At all. You know? And nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. That's what the owners count on, the fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant of the big red, white, and blue dick that's being jammed up their assholes every day. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
This danger can be stated in the form of a simple equation, which I think might be the defining equation of life in the 21st century. B times C times D equals R, which means biological knowledge multiplied by computing power multiplied by data equals the ability to hack humans. R. If you know enough biology and you have enough computing power and data, you can hack my body and my brain and my life, and you can understand me better than I understand myself. You can know my personality type, my political views, my sexual preferences, my mental weaknesses, my deepest fears and hopes. You know more about me than I know about myself. And you can do that not just to me, but to everyone. A system that understands us better than we understand ourselves can predict our feelings and decisions, can manipulate our feelings and decisions, and can ultimately make decisions for us. Now, in the past, many tyrants and governments wanted to do it, but nobody understood biology well enough, and nobody had enough computing power and data to hack millions of people. Neither the Gestapo nor the KGB could do it. But soon, at least some corporations and governments will be able to systematically hack all the people. We humans should get used to the idea that we are no longer mysterious souls. We are now hackable animals.
Literally telling you to your face. Nobody seems to notice and nobody seems to care. Well, until they do, it's gonna remain the same. But there are some people doing stuff. And the only way to make the change is to take the time needed to spread awareness, to alert and inform and arouse intelligence. Because the people that you give your power to and that are seeking power, you think they really give a fuck about what happens to you? Is that what you do in your normal life? When it comes down to somebody you don't know and a situation,
Are you that person who sacrificed themselves for the greater good? How many people do you actually know are willing to do that? We'll put on a front and say that we will or that we did. But do we continue that practice? Only some. Only some. It's a shame. It's a true shame how simple this is. And people still can't get it.
So if you haven't had your mind blown in a while, I am about to blow it up. Follow me. So BlackRock and Vanguard own everything. And I mean everything. So for example, you can find all of this on Yahoo Finance. Go there, type in a company, look at the ownership breakdown. This is Pepsi, Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. This is Coca-Cola. These are the food brands they own. I'm telling you, just go to Yahoo Finance and look it up. This is no bullshit. They own Twitter, they own Facebook, they own Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google and YouTube. They own Apple, they own Microsoft. They are enormous investors in Android. So Apple and Android, both owned by them. They own IBM, they own Intel, they own all the software companies and computer companies that you would look at social media on, which they own the social media companies. They own the travel booking companies, they own the airplane companies, they own Shell, they own BP, they own Exxon, they own the mining companies that we use, and they own the metals, they own the agricultural industry, and the machines used to harvest that agriculture. They own Big Pharma, they own the banks, so they hold your money. They also own Visa, they own MasterCard, they own practically everything. They work closely with the federal government, giving them loans and grants. They own the media you watch, CBS, NBC, CNN, HBO, TNT, Stars. And feel free to fact check me. Go to Yahoo Finance, type in these companies, and look at the top 4 or 5 stockholders. You will find Vanguard and BlackRock, and sometimes Berkshire Hathaway, at the top every time. The more companies you type in, the more this is going to freak you out. So who invests in Vanguard and BlackRock, and who does Vanguard and BlackRock invest their money into? The Clintons, the Bushes, the Obamas, Schiff, Pelosi, Schumer, McConnell. So when you go to look up who owns Vanguard, it's private. This is where it gets tricky, because these people like to keep a low profile. The Orsini family, the Bush Foundation, and the Bush family, and both of them are Skull and Bones alum from Yale, if you want to go like hopping down that rabbit hole. That's a whole other story. The Royal family, some of the other names I'm sure you've heard of are the Rockefeller, the Rothschilds, the Vanderbilt family, and if you look closely, who is that? Anderson Cooper, Mr. CNN. These two companies, along with State Street and Berkshire Hathaway, make roughly 86% of the money in the world. Go look it up. It is all there if you're willing to take the time to research it. And maybe next time when CNN is pushing a Pfizer vaccine, people are like, oh, I don't know if I want to take that. And Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are fact-checking that and censoring people and doctors that speak out against it. Think twice and then think one more time. These people do not care about you or I, they care about themselves.
Last year, in 1 year, our country declared top secret 16 million documents. 16 million documents that you and I are not allowed to see in 1 year. I had to figure that must be just about everything they do. Just about. Maybe I don't know how many documents they would have. But I find it interesting that when I was in the military as a Navy SEAL, I had a top secret security clearance that was required. And I've been a mayor and I've been a governor. Now I'm neither. I'm a citizen. At what point do I lose my top secret security clearance? How am I any different today than I was before when it comes to security? And yet, because I become a civilian or a citizen, now I'm not allowed to know things that I could know as a governor, that I could know as a SEAL. And yet I'm the same person. But I guess being a civilian puts you at the bottom of the food chain or a citizen of knowledge. And I think it's wrong. Now, the thing that you'll see in the book that I dedicated the book to Congressman Ron Paul. And I did that because he was the only person in our Congress when WikiLeaks happened that stepped out on the floor of Congress and gave what I thought one of the greatest speeches I'd heard, when he stated unequivocally that WikiLeaks has killed no one. How many people have been killed from the lies, the false intelligence, and the deception we got to put us into the Iraq War? Also, the fact that I think what he said that was extremely important was that in a free country like ours, when telling the truth, people accuse you of being a traitor or treason. When the truth equals treason in a free society, then we're hurting. When telling the truth means people accuse you of being a traitor, the truth is what it is. The truth is the truth. When I ran for governor, I never used a prepared speech for anything to win, because I ran under the premise of if you tell the truth, you don't have to have a good memory. I think that people appreciated honesty, and I think that people appreciated hearing someone running for office that didn't claim to know everything. And I think that they realized at that point that truly honesty was more important to elect somebody. Now, the state of our country today, we're in a mess. And who is to blame? The Democrats and the Republicans. They have been in charge for my entire life. I am an independent, dyed in the wool, true and true. I despise them both equally. Not one over the other. I dislike both. I'm an equal opportunity despiser of both our political parties. I agree with what Ralph Nader said. We are a two-party dictatorship in this country. Now, how can we break it? How can we take our country back? See, I not only talk about things, sometimes I give solutions. How can we take our country back today? I believe it's as simple as the nose on your face, if I can use that cliche or another one, but unfortunately we can't see the forest for the trees. How can we do it? Simple. Stop voting for Democrats and Republicans. Stop voting for Democrats and Republicans. Remember, voting's not a horse race. You're not there to pick a winner. You're there to vote your heart and conscience for the candidate you believe fits your values the most and who you believe in. And if you do that, you have voted correctly. You have not wasted your vote. Wasting your vote
said he was an independent, I thought. What's the definition of independent? Independent, not governed by a foreign power, self-governing, free from the influence and guidance or control of another or others, self-reliant, not determined or influenced by someone or something else, not contingent. Government, the act or process of governing, especially the control and administration of public policy in a political unit. The office, function, or authority of a governing individual or body. Exercise of authority in a political unit rule.
I voted for this candidate and he won or she won. But to me, that's not doing your civil duty, your civic duty. It's voting your heart and conscience. And a way we can start, a way we can immediately start to take our country back. How about this? I'll back up a second. I no longer believe in the third party movement. And I'll tell you why. The Democrats and Republicans have corrupted the system so badly that any third party in which to survive will have to corrupt itself. Where you've already got a two-headed monster, why would you want a three-headed one? I now advocate the abolishment of all political parties in the United States of America, turn them into political action committees, which is what they are anyway. Certainly they can endorse, but end it there. And on every ballot in the United States of America, here's a simple thing we can do. Remove the party designation and put down only the name. It's too simple. The system's set up for it. If you're conservative, you don't need to know anybody's name. You look for the party. Republican, Republican, Republican. If you're liberal, you don't need to know a name. Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. By only putting down the name would then require you as a voter to educate yourself. What does John Smith stand for? Because you wouldn't have that crutch in there that would tell you conservative or Democrat. And there are elections in this country where none of the above would prevail. And what's wrong with that? A vote of no confidence, that would send a huge message, huge, to every elected official. Imagine these ideas coming from a pro wrestler. I didn't go to college. I'm not a political science major, and I'm certainly not a lawyer. Imagine that, all these ideas that this pro wrestler comes up with. You know? But anyway, those are a few of the things. And as you look into this book, and I will open up here for questions in a minute, because that's usually the best way. I don't want to just lecture. I'd like to answer questions and what's on your mind. But as you look through this book, I hope it does frighten you. I hope that it's a wake-up call. I hope that you will be engaged citizens, stop being lemmings. Because right now, we're a country full of lemmings. We're getting marched right off the cliff, and we don't even look left or right. And why? It's the dumbing down of America because of our media. Our media was supposed to be the fourth branch of government. They were supposed to be the watchdog of the other three to report back to us. Well, they're not anymore. They're in bed with the government. They're the government's mouthpiece now. They're no longer a watchdog. Case is in point. What's the top story this last 3-4 weeks? Charlie Sheen. You can't turn the news on now without hearing a report on Charlie Sheen. Now, Charlie, he's got some problems. I feel bad for him, but he hardly deserves but maybe a mention at the end of the news, not the lead story. And what was it a year and a half ago? The main story, the death of Anna Nicole Smith. I almost threw up. Every day they're doing mobile, sending down mobile reporters outside the hotel. Well, we're down here in wherever she was, the Bahamas or wherever the hell it happened. And we're in front of the hotel where Anna Nicole Smith died. Hey, I was alive in '63 when John Kennedy was assassinated. Anna Nicole Smith got way more press in the end than the assassination of our president. Because hers went on and still got legs. I just saw it the other day. Some judge made a ruling to give her house to her boyfriend or something. That's newsworthy. It's like when I was supposed to have a television show on MSNBC, but that's a whole other matter. They tried to tell me what I was supposed to cover every day. And at the time, you'll recall, remember the murder you had here where the guy killed his wife out in the boat or whatever it was? A couple years ago? Oh, pardon me? Peters, yeah, that murder. Well, they were shoving that down my throat every day to cover that. And I go, wait a minute. There's 10,000 murders a year. Now, that was a tragic murder, but there are 10,000 murders a year, every year. How is this one so important? Now, it might be important to all you Californians because you live here. It's close to you. But go back to Minnesota with me. We have our own murders. Why do we need to know about yours? And yet, every night, day in and day out, that is the dumbing down of America by our news media. And we're at fault because we accept it. Because we like this titillating journalism. And you know what the downfall was to our news? The show 60 Minutes. Now listen, hear me out. 60 Minutes, a marvelous show. But here's where it was the downfall. Up until that point in time, pre-60 Minutes, the news departments lost money. So they would make it up in the entertainment division because they felt, well, we'll lose money, but it's our job to inform. Right? Along comes 60 Minutes. Lo and behold, it goes to #1 in the ratings. The bean counter's upstairs, the light goes off. You mean we can make money with the news? There was your downfall, because from that point on, the news became about making money, not informing you. It became to ratings rather than information to smarten you up. Now you have, and here's the dangerous part, because of that, you now have the news. They're into creating the news, not into reporting it. And that's very, very dangerous, in my opinion. Very dangerous. So it's up to us to be vigilant citizens. Tom Jefferson said dissension is the greatest form of patriotism, and I believe that. I endorse that completely. There's nothing wrong with dissenting. There's nothing wrong with holding elected officials' feet to the fire. If you don't, you will get bad government. So I hope you'll read this book. I hope that you'll digest the documents that are in it. I hope you're as shocked as I am about what some of the documents are. And if there's any in particular that you see and would like to ask me about as you look into the book, feel free to do so. I won't go into them now because, reading is supposed to be pleasure and it's supposed to be you doing it. So I'm not going to, unless you ask me specifically, I'm not going to go into the things that are in the book. But I will do this. I opened and closed the book more or less with 2 quotations. The first quotation comes from my particular favorite president in my whole life, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
And here's what President Kennedy said to us. There is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is a very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? We're going to keep you safe, right? Then I like to finish off also, just to show it runs through our entire country's history. I'll quote Patrick Henry. Most of us remember Patrick Henry as saying, "Give me liberty or give me death." That was a great quote, brave quote. But he also said this, Patrick Henry, quote, "The liberties of a people never were, nor ever will be, secure when the transactions of their rulers may be concealed from them." And I think that, those are two real great Americans. And the words they speak are, in my opinion, very true. So on that note, I'd like to say thank you, Google, for having me here. Lunch was terrific. It's kind of a remarkable company, I heard, that feeds you. Geez, you're like the Navy. They used to feed me, 3 hots and a cot all the time. And no, actually, I will tell you this. I was at the Naval Amphib Base, Coronado, California, and we won Best Chow Hall for like 11 years in a row in the 11th Naval District. Every Thursday, we would have steak and lobster in the Navy. And I was on what they call comrades, because commuted ration type thing, because our jobs take us away from the base so often as a SEAL that they pay you money. So you have to eat at the chow hall when you're there. And but it was, I think lunch was 65 cents and you get steak and lobster. So that's not a bad price. Of course, then again, let's remember this was way back in the early 70s when the economy was much different, but so was my salary. Because when I joined the Navy, initially, I made $122 a month.
And the economy was much different in the early 1970s, because in 1971 is when we went off the gold standard, and when money became no longer backed by gold, which therefore makes it fake paper with ink.
1% of the people in the general population have the overwhelming amount of money, and 1/10 of that 1% has almost all of that, right? So I think it's like the richest 100 people in the world have as much money as the bottom 2.5 billion. And you think, well, that's a terrible thing, and perhaps it is, but what you have to understand is that that law governs the distribution of creative production across all creative domains, right? It's something like a natural law, and we'll talk about that more, but imagine what happens when you play Monopoly. You've all played Monopoly. What happens when you play Monopoly? One person ends up with all the money. All right, then you play another game of Monopoly. What happens? One person ends up with all the money. It's actually the inevitable consequence of multiple trades that are conducted randomly. So if you take 1,000 people and you get them to play a trading game, you each give them $100, say, or $10, and they have to trade with another person by flipping a coin. I win the coin toss, you give me $1, you win, I give you $1. If we all play that long enough, one person will end up with all the money and everyone else will end up with zero. So it's a deeply built feature of systems of creative production, and no one really knows what to do about it, because of course the danger is that all the resources get funneled to a tiny minority of people at the top, and a huge section of the population stacks up at zero. But to blame that on the oppressive nature of a given system is to radically underestimate the complexity of the problem. No one actually knows how to effectively shovel resources from the minority that controls almost everything to the majority that has almost nothing in any consistent way, because as you shovel money down, it tends to move right back up, and it's a big problem. But the thing you want to understand about that 1% issue that you always hear about is that it applies in every single realm where there's difference in creative production. Every realm. Doesn't matter. Number of records produced, number of records sold, number of compositions written. So here's an example. 5 composers produce the music that occupies 50% of the classical repertoire, right? Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Mozart. That's right, those 5. So that's another example of this Price's law of scaling. It applies to all sorts of things, like number of hockey goals scored is also distributed this way. Size of cities follows the same distribution. So, people talk about all the time about how unfair it is that 1% of the population has the vast amount of the money, and 1% of the 1% has most of that money, and 1% of the 1% of the 1% has most of that money. But it's an inevitable conclusion of iterated trading games, and we don't.
2 days ago,
the Chinese last month unveiled the world's first digital currency from a major power. Currency that would not be printed, but would exist only in cyberspace on your phone, for example. Is the Fed working on a digital dollar? We are actually evaluating that. Most major countries are now looking at the possibility of having a digital currency and really asking the question, imagine a government that creates money that has an expiration date. And if you don't use it, it'll disappear. That's happening already with the digital yuan, and Americans are rightfully skeptical.
President Biden issued an executive order to explore the creation of a U.S. central bank digital currency, effectively converting the dollar into a centralized digital currency.
The Federal Reserve just announced that it's about to show us its new digital payment system this year in July. This is having a huge ripple effect across.
But what have they already done to show you their true colors, people?
Money. How does that word make you feel? Is it a rush of adrenaline, dollar signs running through your head like a slot machine? Perhaps you feel motivated, ready to send those work emails you've been putting off, or spend an extra hour writing that movie script that you're certain will be a hit. But maybe you don't feel so good when you hear that word. Maybe the mere mention of money causes your hands to go clammy, your heart rate to rise, and your brain to start doing somersaults around all the ways in which you don't have, need more, want more, money. Whatever your response is, we all have one. Because, as they say, money makes the world go round. Whether it's your $5 coffee every morning to start your day or the $3,000 loan payment you just made, not a day goes by for most of us that we don't consume, spend, study, or merely think about money. You could be the driver of a sports car wearing a diamond necklace or the homeless person who watches that car drive by. On one level or another, money matters to us all. Yet for as much as money matters, it's surprising that there's so much we don't know about it, and a lot of things that we think we do that are just plain wrong. This is a crash course on how your world and the world of high finances intertwine, in hopes that, in the end, we know that much more about this illusion that keeps the economic world spinning. Before we go on, here's a message from our sponsor for today's video, Masterworks. One thing most of us do know to introduce you to Masterworks. Masterworks is an award-winning startup in New York City that allows people like you and I to invest in blue-chip art. Traditional assets can lose value due to current events, but the value of art may not be as subject to these conditions. You can value an original Picasso painting anywhere right now, and even with the current economic state of the world, it will still retain its value. With countries currently dealing with record high levels of inflation, this is now especially important. The last time inflation was this high, art appreciated at an average of 17.5% per year, according to the Masterworks All Art Index, which was almost double the rate of inflation in the same period. Masterworks gives you the potential to see returns on artwork from world-renowned artists. This isn't the metaverse or NFTs, this is tangible contemporary art from established artists with track records of high-value works that sell for hundreds of thousands. And the results speak for itself. In 8 of their 9 exits, Masterworks has delivered net returns over 13.9% to their investors. Shares of paintings by artists like Banksy, Kaws, and Basquiat have sold out within minutes. It's easy to see why demand is growing, but subscribers can skip the waitlist today with the special link in the description. Net return refers to the annualized internal rate of return net of all fees and costs, calculated from the offering closing date to the date the sale is consummated. IRR may not be indicative of Masterworks paintings not yet sold, and past performance is not indicative of future results. See important Reg A disclosures at masterworks.com/cv. Back to our story. Contrary to what you might think, money as we know it today, at least in its physical form, has remained largely unchanged for millennia. The first sign of what we might think of as a banknote took the form of a piece of leather in China in 118 BCE, and 900 years later, paper currency came to fruition. It would be another several hundred years before this kind of currency would make its way to Europe.
So, the very creation started in China. The very creation of crypto and social credit system started in China. And where are we going?
Europe, and then the rest of the world. Centuries have now passed, yet the basic concepts invented by the Chinese aren't that distinguishable from what we have today. In fact, the only real difference is what these notes and coins represent. The first real global system of valuing currency was the gold standard, which began in England in the early 1800s. It tied a currency's value directly to the established value of gold. So in a country like the United States, $1 was pegged at exactly 1/50th an ounce of gold. This system was set up that, in such a way, ideally, it would provide a stable monetary environment around the world. And it did for a while, but as with all natural resources, the supply of gold was not as fixed as we originally thought. As a result, countries began dropping it as a means to measure the value of the money. In 1971, U.S. President Richard Nixon officially severed the convertibility between dollars and gold.
I directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
By that time, the U.S. dollar was seen as a global standard currency, so once the dollar was no longer dictated by the value of gold, pretty much nothing else was. If the value of the dollar is no longer determined by the value of gold, what exactly makes $1 worth $1? Well, instead of a commodity-backed system like the gold standard, we now have something called fiat currency, which has no intrinsic value, and is instead backed by a government. What gives today's dollar its value is the economic supply and demand in the United States. And who controls that? Governmental financial systems. In the case of the United States, it has the Treasury and the U.S. Mint in charge of printing its money. But as we can see in the growing number of digital businesses and iPads in place of cash registers, money printing is a dying business. So if a government isn't literally printing money, how exactly does cash come into circulation? The vast majority of money exists only as numbers on a computer. Incredible amounts of money digitally credited to commercial banks by a country's central bank. This central bank controls how much money it deposits into the commercial banks based on the economic situation of the country. During the earlier stages of the pandemic in the US, some of that money was sent directly to bank accounts in the form of stimulus checks. But that's an extreme case, and most of the time that's not how the money ends up with us. Here's how it usually works. A central bank sends money to banks and credit unions nationwide, and they in turn distribute that money into the economy by lending it to their customers. Which brings us to the topic of debt. Around 80% of Americans are in some kind of debt, yet many people don't know what exactly debt is and how its moving parts work. What they do know, and what is backed by several studies, is that even the idea of paying off debt can be a severe emotional strain. No one wants to owe anyone anything, but with the cost of living vastly outpacing the money we earn for a living, loans are the necessity everyone hates, yet most can't live without. You get a loan to purchase your car, start your small business, go to college, or buy a house. Very few people can afford a house with the money in their bank accounts, yet all of us need a roof over our heads. So some people choose to rent, while others decide to take out a loan from the bank in the form of a mortgage. But banks aren't charity organizations, they're built to make profit, and the way they do that is through interest. Interest is the amount you, the borrower, pay to use the money a bank or financial institution has loaned you. Think of it like the rent you pay on your apartment every month. You don't own the apartment, but you get to use it for a fee. In the same way, you don't own the money you use to purchase your house, but you get to use it for a fee. And this buy now, pay later model does not only exist for big purchases like a house and college, it has permeated our entire society, so much that most things we purchase now exist on this model, especially since the creation of the credit card. Don't have enough cash for that new couch? Put it on your credit card. Want to get that consoles like the Xbox follow the same model. We now use credit to pay for even small things like a sandwich, a new pair of pants, or food for our dogs. If we pay our balances on time for those purchases, we can avoid the interest rates that credit card companies charge and we'll be fine. But for a lot of us, especially in hard times, we tend to build interest on our cards, which can quickly lead to a pretty bad spot financially. Credit cards can help provide a financial buffer in a bind if needed, but they also come with an element of risk. So are they worth it? There's some mixed feelings about this. Some people think that using credit cards is a surefire way to send yourself straight into sinking debt. But others see frequent credit card use as a way to build good credit, which, if you've ever leased an apartment or bought a car, is an important part of daily life these days. Whichever side of the fence you're on, one thing we can all agree on is that you need to be careful when using credit cards so that you don't overspend and dig yourself into much deeper debt than is necessary.
So you see how it starts? First we remove the gold. So first the pirates steal the gold. And then we replace it with credit, with a piece of plastic now. And then here we are today, where the dollar is worth nothing more than the idea you are taught in school, and you're never taught about how the money works, how the government, the federal treasury, that is no Fed than the FedEx name, meaning it is not federal, it's private. It's a private quasi-company in bed with all the governments all over the world. And now, because all the governments control and you are no longer independent, we're going to use the same credit system and control you some more. I'll show you.
China's social credit system. Now, a lot of people...
Does everybody remember all my posts during COVID, during the lockdown, when I was driving down Route 5, noticing the center of the road getting dug up and all the cameras put in all the four-way intersections? But nobody seemed to notice and nobody seemed to care.
People either try to make excuses for it or they try to talk about how bad it actually is. I'm here to tell you that it's probably not what you think, but it in fact is probably much worse than you think. Everyone likes to make this comparison of China's social credit system to the episode of Black Mirror, where the woman is basically in a dystopian future where everyone has this app and they're basically rated on their popularity, whether people like them, and they're rated out of 5 stars and they're segregated as such. So, for example, car rental companies won't rent to people below a certain score, people will judge you for being below a certain threshold, not invite you to events, companies might reject you from jobs. But anyway, all of this is based on the ability of everybody else being able to rate each other. So it's not really the same as China's social credit system in that in China, nobody is rating each other. Another misconception I'd like to get out of the way first is comparing it to the credit system, the credit score system of the US, so think of things like FICO. Most of you are probably familiar with the financial credit score that rates your financial trustworthiness. It's intended to give creditors an indication of risk and how likely you are to repay your loan commitments. However, outside of transactions, a bad credit score does not prevent you from seeing your family or enrolling your kids in public school. In China, an individual's finances, social media activities, credit history, health records, online purchases, tax payments, legal matters, and people you associate with, in addition to images gathered from China's 200 million surveillance cameras and facial recognition software. By the way, do the math. That is 1 surveillance camera for every 7 citizens. So what I want to talk to you today about is how actually your social credit score is rated, what it means for you, how you gain and lose points, and how the kind of tier system, the caste system that they've created actually affects people in China. A huge shout out to Jordan Harbinger podcast. I was recently a guest with Winston over on his podcast, and it was super fun. And seriously, before the episode on me and Winston comes out on the podcast, before that's publicly released, go check out his other stuff because he's interviewed some of the most fascinating people I've ever seen, and I love his interviews approach. And also, I've been binging all of his content. So I promise you, if you like my content, you'll definitely like his content. So go check it out. So it's super interesting. As you guys probably know, I lived in China for over 10 years, and the first place that China tried to roll this out, or at least test, was in northern China, in the province of Shandong, in the city called Rongcheng. And Rongcheng is actually a place I've spent a bunch of time in. I've actually thoroughly researched the area, but I also filmed with my friend an entire part of our documentary, Conquering Northern China, in this area. And we filmed it right before they rolled out the social credit system. Thankfully, we've kept in contact with people from there, and we've been able to talk to them about how it's affected their lives. Now, I gotta preface this first by saying Rongcheng, this area of Shandong province, it's always been a sweetheart, to the government. So they got the sweetheart status in the government. When we were there, we rode our motorcycles throughout most of this area of the province, and we saw it was being used to test out these wide boulevards, model farms, wind projects, preserved tourist villages, very clean and organized fishing methods and things like this. It was kind of mind-blowing to see this Potemkin village-esque, almost North Korea-esque level of fakeness being put on, because it was almost like this poster child of China was used for its propaganda purposes. The system was being rolled out through the country, but Rongcheng is fully documented. And I actually found the Chinese documents used to build the social credit system. So no more bullshit about the matrix and looking at people with big data and oh, this person does this and blah, 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 blah. I actually found the framework and the documents used by the Chinese government to roll out their social credit system. So keep in mind, this is how the social credit system is being experimented with, and then eventually how it was rolled out to other areas. So this is in its purest form. The government basically divvied out 1,000 points to its citizens, and they're kept by local Communist Party officials. This is their baseline. So you can either go above 1,000 or you can go below 1,000. But basically, before we talk about what gives and takes away points, I want to tell you guys how their tier system works. So it's very ironic that in China, a communist country, people are rated based on their credit worthiness, right? So they have this tier system, a caste system, basically, that puts people really high up or really low. The highest tier is called AAA. Of course, that is the best. It is called model of credit worthiness. If you have 1,050 points or higher, so this means you went above the baseline, you get some benefits, right? The second tier is called AA, or exceptional creditworthiness. This is basically the same benefits of AAA. There's no difference, but I'm feeling like if you were missing that extra A, if you're just a AA, I would feel super subpar to my neighbor. If he's a AAA, I'm only a AA, but then I'd probably throw in like an excuse related to battery size to like make myself feel better. Anyway, the next level is the A creditworthiness, and this one comes in 3 different flavors. You get A+, A, and A-. So this is when you're kind of hovering around, what they divvied out in the beginning. These are your benefits. You get to be entered on a list to be used as a model in publicity, so you give the ability to the government to use you as a model citizen for publicity. Wow, awesome. You get priority in school enrollment and other social assistance. So this is scary. This is the few Chinese social program.
See, because the whole world is based on energy, and they teach you in school so you could get an A or a B or a C or a D or an F. And then look at the battery. The same amount of power, 1.5 volts, are in the AA battery. The same amount in the AAA battery. Now, when you add them together, you get bigger amounts of volts. Well, that's how the economy works when you are the energy that makes it grow. But don't you think you should be your own energy on your own land, in your own community of people that you don't need the government for, because you all have your separate abilities and skills? And you trade your skill without having to worry about paying the government. Because where does taxes come from? When did taxes come into the picture? Through war. And what does war do? War lowers the population. War hurts the people. And the ones who declare it never get injured. The governments, they stay and gain more power. Because who funds the war? You need money to build all the things you're building, right? Well, when you have the private quasi-company of the bank funding both sides, that's how it works. It's real simple. All you got to do is read, research, open your eyes, have common sense.
So they actually have. You have to be an A to kind of get priority assistance for these things. And school enrollment is supposed to be completely non-competitive in terms of what schools you go to outside of your grades. So now it's changing to that if you are not a good model citizen, your kids don't get to go to good schools, which is terrifying. You get preferential care in employment, social assistance, and you get preference over equally qualified competitors in promotion or retention. So this is in jobs and work and things like this. And by the way, I'm not talking about some like secret speculation. These are the official documents that say this. If you're an A, you get treated as a better person. Next is relatively creditworthy. So that's when you've dipped below 1,000, right? You're locked into it for 2 years. And what happens now is if you're in B tier, you're probably going to get lectures and visits from people, the government officials, and they're going to tell you how you can improve your score, right? But you're going to be locked in there in like probation for 2 years. Now, when you drop down to a C, when you're at like 600 to 849 points, you're locked in there for 3 years before you can move up to a B even. More visits from officials. They're going to be watching you, making sure you're on good behavior. They're going to be scrutinizing you in daily life. You're going to be on a list now. Now, this list won't go to the full public with all of your information, address, age, what you did wrong, blah, blah, but it will go to other government officials. So they said it will go to a limited audience. When you drop to the lowest tier, and this is D, this is called not creditworthy. Basically, it's like if you talk about Indian caste system, it's the untouchables. You're locked into level D for 5 years, right? So this is, when you're locked into D, you're talking about the officials are coming to visit you all the time. They can cancel any government funding that you have, so not just temporarily suspend it. We're talking about canceling the government subsidies.
So when you're born into a world and you go into the education system where you don't ever get to gather intelligence because you're told to trust and believe everything that the pre-indoctrinated people believe, that was built by one family to create obedient workers. Literally, the words out of his mouth. The Rockefeller. But nobody seems to notice, and nobody seems to care. So once you capture the animal and you domesticate them and breed them in captivity, they no longer understand the real world outside of the sanctuary. It's real simple.
You go on a blacklist, and this is public. All Ds will go public. So publicly disclosing the information on their untrustworthiness. They can revoke all of your titles. So if you had a PhD or scientific discoveries, you'll have that erased, right? You can't get a loan, and you can actually lose your job over this. So if it's time...
So somebody like me informing and alerting you, like John F. Kennedy said in 1961, to the newspaper industry, I would be a dissident. Even though I never killed anybody, I didn't commit any crimes, this would be considered a crime. Me simply telling you the truth.
To what happened, like what you did to be untrustworthy according to the government, they can actually completely get rid of your qualifications and actually strip away your job. So you're locked into there for 5 years, but what you have to understand is that there's all kinds of direct judgment factors. So the Chinese government actually says if you commit an intentional crime, right, this brings you to the bottom of D. It's not like some sort of sliding scale here. If you went out there and did something bad on purpose, you just straight go down to D. But let me make one thing super clear. If you are a political dissident or you speak out against the government, you're screwed either way. The Communist Party of China will just lock you up or disappear you, okay? This is not a country with a rule of law. This is more of a system to coerce and influence future behavior and to standardize it for greater and ultimate control over the population.
It's real simple, folks. It's not rocket science, and it's never been before in the history of humanity so easy to learn. It's at your fingertips. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But you better hurry up before they erase it or before they make it a subscription for you to be able to look something up, or before they just decide tomorrow that you can't use your paper anymore. And then all hell breaks loose, and you get problem, reaction, solution all over again. Or they just turn off the power, and you can't use your digital asset because it doesn't exist. It's in some building with servers that just anybody could bomb. Anybody could terrorize it, and that would be the perfect excuse for all the sheep to believe that some terrorist came over and now we need to protect you. See, isn't it interesting? It's always we're going to keep you safe along with the money. Give us your gold, we'll put it in this giant locked up vault, and we'll hold on to it and protect it for you because we are who you can trust. You can't trust yourself. You're not capable. And if you didn't hand it in, what happened? They brought you to jail. And they would have your other sheep herd members tell on you. Kind of like they did with COVID. You see, this is how it works, people. You control the minds. You control the people. I mean, if COVID didn't show you that by now, I don't know what will. And there's only one way to stop it. And that is by being independent, by definition. By growing a fucking sack and informing and alerting your fellow humans. You know, the one species, human, the human species that's in the race to the bottom of the brainstem because they can't think for themselves anymore. Instead, they'd rather be on Twitter, falling right into the trap, where you can't hear a voice, where you believe that the person on the other end is real when it's really just a robot, when somebody could just buy multiple accounts. There's trillionaires in this world that people don't even know their names. Trillionaires that could pay people to have a verified blue little check mark by their name and do whatever who's paying them tells them to do. And what do they care? They're getting paid. They're already captured. They already can't survive when the power goes out. So it ain't going to matter in the end, because they're going to fall right in suit, just like the rest. Even though they're helping do it, the people paying them already know that they don't have the power. They already know once we cut the power, they'll fall right in line. They'll be begging the government, please feed me.